Why do we have unsafe housing in Manhattan? When it comes to looking for housing, there are only so many available homes at a given time. We look for homes that are close to work or school, but ultimately somewhere we can actually afford. Unfortunately, as renters, we must also have to consider the safety of a home. Unlike other college towns in Kansas, Manhattan doesn't require homes to be inspected by a licensed housing inspector before people move in. Instead, the city has an optional inspection program. By their own polling and data, most people don't know the program even exists. As a result, renters in Manhattan are being put into unsafe housing condition, which puts their health and well-being at risk, or worse, their lives. One case in particular that stands out is the story of K-State veterinarian student Audrey Wilson. This is her story.
I was looking at Frontier because, they have a million properties. They're nice to you until you sign a lease, first of all. So there was 2 apartments that I really liked, and they said, sorry, it looks like someone just signed a lease here, so we're gonna show you this other one. They recommended me one. And then, so I went to go see it, and it was clearly being worked on. Clearly was like in the process of being worked on. And I was like, okay, so this will get a little better by the time I move in. That was my impression. And I asked the guy, this guy was giving me a tour, right? And I'm specifically asking him, and I'm recording it on video, by the way. That's what you do. Record video. And then, so anyways, I was asking him questions. I asked him about pest control specifically. I asked him, is this going to be fixed? All this stuff that's being worked on, the walls patched up, all this stuff. I said, there looks like there's a water leak, like from the ceiling, because it was a basement apartment. And he was like, oh yeah, they're still working on it. Like, it'll all be good when you move in. That's what they all say. So I ended up signing a lease for the place they recommended. Got my keys, and I paid a full month's rent, and it wasn't what they said it would be. And I could not move in. Like, it smelled like urine, and at the time I thought it was because it was a pet-friendly house, and I thought, like, once they cleaned it really good, it would be fine. However, they didn't even clean it, because it was in the middle of the pandemic, so I brought my Clorox wipes, and I, wiped, and it was not even clean. And so I was like, okay, they didn't even clean this. Like, the walls aren't patched even like they said it would be. Like, it was just not. And so I call my lease property manager, and then I sent emails about it. Anyways, they sent people to work on it. Couldn't even move in for another 2 weeks. And they didn't even offer me anything. I wasn't even living there for 2 weeks. And then, and I paid another month. That was I paid 2 months rent that month because I made sure I had time to move. I would have been screwed if I didn't at this point. I noticed things were not cool, real quick. 2 weeks. The first week I actually moved in there, I heard weird noises in my walls. I was in the basement, so I was like, okay, I have to catch some mice. I grew up in places where we had mice, and my mom was like, it's not that big deal. I've had mice in most of my houses growing up. And so I was like, okay, fine, I'll be a big girl, whatever. I guess this is adulting. Yeah. And so I put some traps out. I was like, okay, this isn't going to be fun, but okay. And so I waited. Then I started hearing more noises and screeching, weird screeching. And by the way, I was emailing Kale. He was my property manager at Frontier, and he's a terrible human being. He did nothing to help me. I kept emailing him, and he was like, I hope it's a squirrel or something. That's literally what he said. And so then I put the traps out. I was like, okay, we're gonna see. And one night my dog heard something in a trap, and he was like, I hear something. And so I went and looked, and it was moving around on there still, and I was like, oh Lord. And it was dark. It was late at night. They came out late at night, the critters. And then I was like, what is that? That's not a mouse. And I was scared, and I called my dad and cried for a long time because I didn't even know what it was. I was just like, that's not a mouse. And so I was too scared to take care of it, Okay, morning comes, and I just look down because I worked at the rabies lab for almost 3 years. For a long time, I worked at the rabies lab. We'd get bats in the mail because they carry rabies a lot. I've seen bats get diagnosed with rabies, multiple bats a year. in Kansas. And so I saw that bat on there and I was like, oh, this is a whole different ball game here. Of course, I just called my property manager, raging. Like 2 weeks after I moved in, a random guy came up to, like, was in my front lawn. And I had just gotten groceries and he doesn't even have like a company logo, no mask on, nothing. And he's staring at me when I pull up and I'm like, who is this creep? And he's like, I'm here to look for bats. And I was like, what? And he was like, yeah, were you complaining about bats? And I said, no, I've been complaining about noises in my walls, but a girl just moved out from the apartment above me. And so I said, did she complain? And he was like, oh yeah, that's the apartment I'm supposed to go to. And it was a top floor apartment and there's an attic up there. At that moment, I was like, what? I kind of knew what was going on, but then when I caught the first bat, I was like, okay, they knew this was going on. I call him enraged and I'm like, if there was a bat issue, I would have liked to know what was going on. And I called him when that random guy came too and said the same thing. And he said, I can assure you there's no bat problem. We had someone confirm it was taken care of. And I'm like, I don't care. You should have told me this was an issue, like, ever. Like, and so then, because if they're making their way to the basement, because I did lots of research on bats after this, I've learned some interesting things. They make their way to the basement, it's like an infestation. So, and if they're in the walls, urine and guano is like in the wall. Guano is really bad for you, by the way. It can make you have like histoplasmosis and all this other stuff. This is bad. And so basically it took me emailing them like every single week, if not more. No, most definitely more. Sometimes I would go back and forth with him every day. He kept sending the same. So, okay, I did research also. So something people should know is like Frontier, different people own different houses. Like sometimes Frontier owns the property themselves, but like most of the time it's some other slumlord that you have to dig on to find out that they're super shady. The Hallman brothers, for example, I started digging on that and they just hire out some random dudes for their maintenance company. And they kept coming and just throwing up bat houses behind my house, which I later found out is actually worse because then they just find a home and they never go away. He put foam in one of the holes that they were coming through into my apartment, which they can chew through that because they're like mice. They can chew through things. It got worse and worse and worse. And it got to the point where every single night they were flying around my apartment. Then I found the girl, because I'm like an FBI agent, and I found the girl that lived there before me, like last year. The only reason she got let out of her lease was because it flooded. So that's why they were like doing so much work on my apartment. She had videos of bats flying around the whole time she lived there. She lived there for 9 months and I lived there for not even 6 months, 3 months like total that I actually lived there. Like my lease is technically still going because they refused to let me out of it. For example, they also would not give any notice when maintenance came multiple times. The majority of the time, I didn't know that they were showing up. And they, like I said, they were guys that didn't have any company shirts on. They didn't have masks on most of the time until I complained about that. And then they started wearing them. And they were coming in my house. So one morning I woke up to a guy like screaming and pounding on my door, and I was like half awake, so I was just like, okay, that's probably like a mistake. They'll just go away. Apparently it was the maintenance guy because he proceeded to come inside, and I got out of bed and I was like, who even are you? And I threatened to tase him because I lived by myself. I have had experiences where I've had to call the cops because like drunk guys were knocking on my apartment before. Never have I had someone like random in my apartment, and I have a taser, so I was like, I'm gonna tase you, like changing your air filter. And I was like, why didn't you tell me you're coming? And then apparently Frontier was supposed to, and then Frontier like kept telling me that they didn't even know the maintenance guys were supposed to be coming. And then the maintenance guy, one time the boss maintenance guy was there and I confronted him about it. And he was like, I have paperwork proving that they knew we were coming. So I confronted Kale about it eventually because I had a code inspection and he came to follow up with the code inspection because there was guano, because like I said, they were flying around everywhere. So there was guano in my furniture, the bats. I put up a camera, like a Wise cam, and there was bat living in my recliner during the day, and then like at night it would come out and fly around, and so there was like guano in my stuff. It was just terrible. And then he came to look at it, and I showed him the guano, and he goes, And then I also had my front door was messed up, and he was like, "I'll send someone to fix your front door today, though." But they couldn't just send someone to clean up the guano today. Like, the guano
Yeah.
sat there until I confronted him in court about it, and then they had a professional cleaning company come clean my apartment.
Did you have to
after I
hire
moved
like
out.
a legal representation?
No, I actually just went to small claims because I was hoping that that would scare them, which I should have known better because it's Frontier. But I was hoping that would scare them and they would let me out of my lease. I got money for my recliner that was ruined, but that's all I got. And then I went up to him after court and I was like, "If you're not going to let me out of my lease, my attorney won't contact you." I was so mad. And then I realized after that, I was like, shit, I have to find an attorney. This is actually something that I found to be an issue as well, is that it was so hard to find legal representation. No one wanted to take them on. No one. No one. The problem with Frontier is they always revert to, we don't even own this property. It's up to the owners. All we can do is communicate like between you two kind of thing. And I'm like, but at the end of the day, I signed a lease through you. You have a responsibility. You know what I mean? And then they wouldn't pay for rabies vaccinations if I got bit, because I almost got bit one time. And they refused to pay for rabies vaccinations for me or my pets because I was working at this time 2 different jobs. I was working
my
2
gosh.
jobs. One of them I traveled for. So when I traveled on the weekends, I would leave like a lot of, because I have a cat, I would leave a lot of food and water for her. And like, I would only be gone one night, but I would be gone like 24 hours, you know what I mean? And I would be anxious because I'm like, are there bats like, is she fighting with bats right now? Because she's sassy. She would try to fight the bat. I know she would. And then she would get bit, you know what I mean? And then she's old as crap. I know she would not survive rabies, like, because she's super old. And like, I just couldn't. And then the bills, if I had to rush her to like the emergency vet, if I found out she got bit or something. Like, and then they wouldn't even help with that. Or if you don't know this, rabies vaccinations are not covered by most insurances. No one can just afford $2,500 for a rabies vaccination. You know, like, I don't have that laying around, and they wouldn't even pay for it. So like, that was a huge issue, is they wouldn't even take any responsibility for what they put me into. So I just felt powerless, and then I couldn't even find an attorney. And so I'm literally, the only option is my mom is co-signing, and she's super mad about it because she's like, I don't want this affecting my credit if they try to come for us and stuff, and I can't afford 2 rents. So she had to help me pay my old rent there. And that makes me feel bad because like, if I don't pay rent there, then they could evict me, and then I'd have an eviction on my record, and then my mom's credit score, my credit score would be screwed. And then, you know, like, I don't want to deal with all that. And so the only option is to have someone sublease, like someone take my lease over there. And then I feel bad for whoever I'm putting into their hands, you know what I mean? It just sucks. I just feel powerless against them. And that's why I went to the Collegian about it, because I was like, I at least want people to know. Because I never would have imagined being in that kind of situation. I mean, like I said, it's bizarre.